Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to Canna Advisors New York webinar Blitz. Still have another maybe minute or two to let people join, but since we're just doing a quick 30 minutes here, we want to get started pretty much right on time. So give another minute or two and we'll get going. I already have quite a few people here. Thanks everybody for joining. All right, I think we've hit 1 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. Mountain time for us here in Boulder, Colorado. We're going to go ahead and get started. We like to be punctual around here at Canna Advisors, so let's make the best use of this 30 minutes we can. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Really a pleasure to have you here with us. As always, this is going to be recorded. We'll send the recording around afterwards. We'll also save some time to take questions at the end if we can. You can put those in the chat at any time throughout the presentation, and we'll circle back around to those at the end. Okay, without any further ado, let's kick things off here. All right, so let's start with some introductions. Just let you get to know Canna Advisors a little bit. So Canna Advisors started here in Boulder, Colorado. We help the state of Colorado get launched and manage some groundbreaking legislation. State by state, Canna Advisors has helped drive policy and consulted emerging businesses around the world. All told, we have over 100 years of experience in cannabis on our team, and we've worked in 31 states, plus Canada, Europe, Guam, and Puerto Rico. So that's just a little bit about us. With me here today, we have Vince DiMichele. Vince is our regulatory analyst. Vince actually interned at Canna Advisors during law school and joined the team full-time after he graduated and passed the law school bar exam. So Vince has got a keen legal sense, and he really keeps our team equipped with all the details we need for complex legal frameworks across all of the states. So thanks so much, Vince, for joining me today.
Thank you, Summer. And yeah, a little brief intro on Summer. Summer is kind of a powerhouse of project management around Canna Advisors. Summer is also a licensed attorney, and so she's able to offer a unique perspective of the legal landscape with a critical eye towards new laws. She's also a superstar at managing complex projects, one of the most organized people I've ever worked with. And she has experience ranging from license application to operation readiness and exit strategy. Her legal background is in tax, business, and administrative law, so that gives her a great perspective when solving clients' problems at Canna Advisors. And I'll turn it back over to Summer to get started.
Thanks so much, Vince. All righty, here we go. Let's start off with a quote here from my fellow senior project manager at Canna Advisors, Garrett Cropsey, who's seen lots of these markets roll out and does think that this is one of the most reasonable approaches to a rollout he's seen. So we're really excited for this New York market to get going.
Yeah, so I'll jump into some news and updates here. This is kind of an overarching timeline, just to give everyone an idea of what's happened so far and maybe what to expect. So as everyone knows, the legislation passed in March of 2021. This decriminalized possession and legalized possession, production, and sale of cannabis. This is unique, and it was without a vote of the people. So New York legislators just got it through. The decriminalization went into effect immediately, allowing possession of up to 3 ounces, which is a good amount compared to other states. And it also allows cannabis smoking anywhere cigarette smoking would be allowed in New York. So that includes on sidewalks, front stoops, and other public places. So if you're smoking a joint on your front step, it's not a basis for a cop to approach you, to stop you, summons you, arrest you, or search you. So great progress there in New York. The Office of Cannabis Management is the sub-department under the Cannabis Control Board that will be overseeing the licensing process. And the Office of Cannabis Management website is live, but we have yet to see much come out of that, though the website being up is a good sign. A sustainable packaging bill has already been introduced right after the original bill was signed, which is interesting, a good signal that sustainability will be at the forefront of New York and that the market is striving to be progressive. The New York Assembly leader has said she expects the Cannabis Control Board will be appointed and up and running by summer. But we'll see if this actually happens. You know, it's not a good idea to make your business decisions based on the word of a politician, but that's kind of the general timeline. And once the board is up, they will be the ones creating regulations. So that's why that's an important date. And then maybe sales will start in March of 2022. We'll see what exactly happens there, a lot up in the air, but kind of a good target date to look out for considering everything now. So what can we glean from other programs? Looking at the past New York medical market, we can't learn a lot. It was a very different process. Speaking with some of our colleagues who had worked in the market in the past, they recommended we treat this as a brand new process. It was a super restrictive round originally. They only allowed a very limited number of licenses. It was very scared and it was so locked down. It was like they thought a marijuana plant was going to break free and attack school children. But they've since come around and the program seems like it will be much more expansive and reasonable than the medical one. We can look to the past licensing process a little bit. I think a good thing to look to here is New Jersey. We have lots of reasons to believe that New York is kind of competing with Jersey and will try to have a similarly competitive process. And then we can also look to New York's alcohol industry and these tied house rules, which have been intimated they will be included in the cannabis regulations as well, which basically, without getting into too much detail, promotes a competitive marketplace, keeps things fair, and prevents really monopolies from forming in the industry. All right, state of the law. So this one's pretty simple in New York. We have the Marijuana Regulation and Tax Act, or MRTA, if you want to get clever with the acronyms. And it covers everything: adult use, medical, hemp. And that is all in one right now. We're waiting on regulations, but everything you want to find to do with cannabis in New York, you're going to find in this bill.
Great. Okay. And with that information in mind, let's just take a look at what we think the licensing timeline could look for this. Of course, this is a best guess based on what we've seen happen in the past in New York, what's happened recently in New York, and what we can glean from other states. So we know it just passed in March. The control board is supposedly going to be appointed this summer. Generally, it takes at least 6 months of drafting and approving regulations, the regulators to wrap their heads around it and to get feedback from the people. Licensing period then could open sometime in early 2022, potentially January, if not likely in the spring. And that will likely be a staggering submission cycle. So it would start with cultivation, processing, retail, or so forth, rolling those out. So they're not handling them all at once. Retail sales could then begin possibly around March, and that would be with the existing medical dispensaries converting over. And then once new retailers are licensed, the new stores will begin to open up then, maybe mid to late 2022 as an optimistic goal there. All right, so New York has a lot of licenses available, actually, more than we see in some other states. So per MRTA, a license will be awarded for cultivators, processors, co-ops, distributors, retailers, consumption, deliveries, nurseries, and micro businesses. So we're going to kind of just fly through these and give you a rundown of each of those license types. One thing to definitely keep in mind is that there is no vertical integration allowed here, as Vince mentioned about the tied house rules. Only micro businesses can be vertically integrated. So the goal seems to be to separate those different license types, like Vince said, keep it competitive. Although it does allow for some multiple license holdings, such as a cultivator can apply for a processing license, but we'll get into those.
All right, so getting into the basic licensing requirements here, one of the main things is that you must have a significant presence in the state of New York. So, what this means is that the business applying is either incorporated or organized under New York law, or an outside corporate structure has at least 51% of its owners that are residents of New York. So, either form your business in New York or have most of your owners live there. That's how you're going to satisfy this significant presence thing. Moving on, sort of the things we see in a lot of licenses or a lot of applications that are also present here. So you're going to have to provide your identity, including any racial or ethnic diversity. And this will be important, as I'll bring up a little bit later on, for scoring. You're going to have to provide ownership and investment information, your corporate structure, evidence of good moral character. Can we trust you with this license? Fingerprints, information about the premises, your building, have you leased or owned it, for how long? Financial statements for the business, is it financially healthy? And then something that Canna Advisors can certainly help with here at the end is writing about your experience. For a cultivator and a processor, you're going to have to discuss your environmental and energy impact, and then also a community benefit plan for all licensees. So talking about how you've reached out to communities that have been disproportionately affected by the enforcement of cannabis. And usually this is what we see as one of the bigger lifts for our clients, and something that we can really help on, that we have a ton of experience doing. So moving in to the specific license types. So for a retail license, it seems like in the rumor mill, our relatively trustworthy New York rumor mill, we have heard that the state is targeting one dispensary per 20,000 population, which should end up being between about 900 and 1,000 licenses total. But we don't expect these all to be licensed at once. So if you see that number and it scares you and you think, how am I going to compete? It's certainly not going to be that way at first, or so we expect. If you're going for retail, you can't hold more than 3 retail licenses, but this is more than for the other license types, which I'll get into. And if you're going to go retailer, you can't have an interest in any other license type. You got to be retail only, and you can have 3 of them. I think the next slide maybe has a little bit more details on retailer. Yeah, thank you, Summer. You have to get your property approved in a retailer. So prior to it being approved, you have to show possession within 30 days. Your property can't be within 500 feet of a school or 200 feet of a house of worship. You have to be able to access it from street level, and it's got to be occupied by other business, trade, or industry, or the area in which you plan to locate has to be occupied by that. You can't go stick your dispensary in the middle of a field. And then an important thing, this is also true of consumption lounges, which we'll touch on later, but you have to notify the municipality in which you intend to file 30 to 270 days before you apply at the state level. So for example, you want to, build a dispensary in the Bronx, you need to, send a letter to the Bronx, let them know that you're planning to have a dispensary there in this window before you send in the state level application. Moving on to processor. Again, we don't know this yet. We'll see in regulation, but it's possible there could be no limit on processor licenses in order to serve as a throttle for the industry to control supply, basically allowing them to release additional processor licenses as they see fit. You can only own one processor license if you're going for that, but you can process in multiple locations. At least right now, that's permitted by the statute, and we'll see what the regulations from the board actually specifically say on that. But as of now, it is allowed. Interestingly, if you already have a processor license, then you can apply for and get a distributor license to distribute just your own products. But you can't do that at first, it seems. Again, we're kind of waiting for more on this, but from our reading of the statute, you'd have to get your processor license, and then you could apply for this license. And if you're going for processor, again, you can't own any part of a retail or a dispensary, as mentioned in the retail slides. Moving on to cultivation. Similarly, you can only own one cultivator license, and co-location is allowed as of now. And you can't own any part of a retail license if you're doing cultivation. But Cultivation actually has the most potential for owning multiple licenses in that if you get a cultivation license, you already have one, you can apply for and obtain a processor and a distributor license to distribute your own products. And then you can also apply for a nursery license to sell directly to other business types, such as a cultivator, a co-op, a registered organization, I think a micro business. So anyone who could be involved in the cultivation, you could get a nursery license and sell them clones, seeds, other agricultural products. I think that sums it up for cultivation.
All righty, I'll take it on from here then for a few other license types. Those are the main ones really that Vince talked about, but New York's not stopping there. Next up is the distributor license. As Vince mentioned, if you're a cultivator or processor, you can get a distributor license to distribute your own products, or you can get a standalone distribution license. Again, you wouldn't be able to own another, you can't own a distributor and a micro business or a retailer, consumption or a registered organization. So trying to keep those separate. Next up is the micro business. Micro business authorizes cultivation, processing, distribution, delivery, and dispensing of your own adult use cannabis products. So you can't own another license outside of a micro business. You can't own one of the full licenses, but this does allow you to be vertically integrated, this is the only opportunity for that here. Next up is delivery. Delivery also can't own any other license but a delivery license. And oddly here, the licensees are limited to having 25 individuals working for them, providing delivery services per week under their license. Next up, consumption. Consumption cannot own more than 3 consumption licenses. So you can't have multiple of these, but you can't own any other license type. This one also is going to require that municipal notification that Vince mentioned. So community support is always important in cannabis licensing, but it's especially important here. You're going to have to reach out directly to the municipality. And also, you're going to want to make sure with the consumption lounge that you have neighbors that are in support, or else, your business is going to be just in trouble from day one. All right, a cooperative license, still kind of waiting for some clarification on this one, but it's going to allow you to acquire, possess, cultivate, distribute, and sell from your licensed premises. But that's only going to be to distributors, consumption sites, and to retailers, but not directly to consumers. Then lastly here on the licenses is nurseries. This is somewhat of an uncommon one. A nursery can produce clones, plants, other agricultural products, and that would be used for growing, obviously, and that you would be selling to cultivators, micro businesses, co-ops, or registered organizations, so meaning retailers or medical dispensaries. So that's somewhat of an interesting license type we haven't seen much across the country. All right, turn it back over to you, Vince.
Yeah, special use permits. So this is the most confusing part of the new New York law for sure. So I'm going to do my best here, but basically the law references these special use permits, which will not extend longer for 90 days, except if, so basically it seems like there are these special use permits, broad category. They would be issued to non-license holders for 90 days and would not be renewable to do certain activities, except if those permittees that have that 90-day window somehow, and I'm going to quote, sorry, because it's confusing. If those permittees have satisfied all of the remaining conditions for licensure, which were not required for the issuance of the special use permit, then you'll be granted a full license. But where it gets confusing is that it's not exactly clear which license these permits would track onto. So the special use permits include the industrial cannabis permit, a trucking permit, warehouse permit, and packaging permit. And so these are somewhat interesting, but there's really not a lot more to say there. One good thing to note is that the industrial cannabis permit seems to allow the permittee to purchase cannabis waste for other uses. So again, promoting sustainability, which is really cool to see. But we're going to put a pin in this for now. Special use permits is a head scratcher. Know that if you're not licensed, it would be an abbreviated application process to receive the permit for 90 days with the opportunity to become fully licensed after, though it's not really clear what that will look like.
Great. Thanks, Vince. Yeah, I love that industrial permit. I've never seen that before. Just imagine someone purchasing waste and, they're repurposing it to make some new material and they're selling cannabis handbags or something. It'll be the next fashion piece in New York. So I'm really excited for that. All right, so let's talk a bit about how to get ahead here in our last minutes. Starting off with priority. Priority goes to social and economic equity applicants, and those will have access to about 50% of all of the licenses. To qualify as a social equity applicant, you have to be one of these 5 groups. So from a community disproportionately impacted, a minority-owned business, woman-owned, disadvantaged farmer, or a service disabled veteran. For social and equity plan participants, license can't be transferred or sold within the first three years without written approval from the board. After that 3-year period, it would be a bit more open, but still some conditions there. New York has this set up a little bit strange, so we'll see how this comes out in the application itself and in the scoring. So they give priority and then they give extra priority. So extra priority would go to people with past marijuana convictions, or if you have relatives with those convictions, people who live in an economically distressed area, or places where criminalization has been enforced in a discriminatory manner. And so we'll have to wait and see exactly what those locations will be, if the state will provide us with maybe a map or some way to check if we're within those areas. And then lastly, individuals with income lower than 80% of the median income. And that's of the county where the individual resides. So, if you're living in rural New York, you're not going to be, you're not going to have to abide by or satisfy the income in New York City, right? That really wouldn't be fair. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about how to get ahead now. So things you can start doing. We talked about the timeline, that if things keep rolling along as they seem like they're going to be, especially with friendly competition with New Jersey, to get the program launched, you're probably going to want to start working on some things now. Of course, you're going to start looking for financing for your business. You know that in the cannabis industry, you can't get a traditional loan like other businesses. You're going to be looking for those private investors. Maybe you could get a private loan. Starting to maybe do some financial modeling, understand what your business is going to cost, what your capital expenses are going to be, what kind of return on investment can your investors expect. So that's the information you're going to want going into this process. Secondly, you're going to want to start looking for a facility. Of course, that's a little bit challenging now since we don't know exactly which areas or which cities are going to be allowing cannabis. And we don't know the zoning yet either within cities. Even if the city has said, yes, we're totally for cannabis, we really don't know which part of the city might be allowed. Probably can make some best guesses there. We can certainly help consult on that. We've seen mixed messages about whether there's property available or not. Some people have said it's been impossible, and we've seen other people with 20 great properties lined up. So I think it really just, you got to get on the ground there, get started searching, connecting with real estate agents, things like that. Third, that's going to be your people. Start getting your team together. At least your core team, right? So who's leading this ship? Who's the captain? Get your investors on board. Get your talent set up, right? So make sure you have somebody with some cannabis experience in there. So you have a nice, strong team. And then lastly, figuring out your process. So for whatever specific license type you're going for, what's important to you? What are the things that you're going to focus on? What's going to differentiate your business from other businesses, right? And I know it seems like it's going to be easy to sell cannabis, but it's still going to be a competitive market. So you need to figure out how to distinguish your business from others. And yeah, I think those will really help. Is there anything I forgot there, Vince?
Sounded good to me.
Great. All
And
right.
then, as always, you got to advocate for yourself. This is where we really say, like, you have the power. Um, in New York, cities can opt out of having dispensaries and consumption lounges. And we've gotten a lot of questions, what do I do? Long Island has already started to opt out in a lot of ways. And people have been talking about whole swaths of the state opting out. And so, what we recommend is that you get out there and you advocate for cannabis. There are good business reasons for a municipality to adopt these businesses and take them in. They oftentimes just don't know them, or they're getting the argument from the other side. So, go talk to your local government, make a presentation, explain why cannabis is going to help, and you'll change their mind. I mean, we've seen this done lots of times. And again, this is something that, we're really good at, and that we can help our clients do. So if you're looking for help, feel free to come to us. Because really, this is going to be super important. I mean, if nobody is getting in front of your municipality and making the positive case for cannabis, it's likely not going to get made at all. Thank you, guys. We have some upcoming webinars. Please continue submitting questions if you have any. But just FYI, we've got a webinar coming up on June 9th on Virginia that will be hosted by our colleagues, Garrett Cropsey. If you remember that quote from the beginning of the presentation, Garrett will be hosting along with Alyssa Goebel. And then June 16th, we're doing a bit of a longer presentation with the law firm Falcon, Rappaport, and Berkman on New York. And that'll be more of an open conversation trying to get some more detail out of the process.
Yeah.
Then June 23rd, we've got one coming up for New Mexico, where our New Mexico native Greg Huffaker will lead that along with Victoria Trusty. And then we'll be presenting about Ohio on July 1st. So lots coming up. And yeah, thanks everyone for attending. And I think we'll jump into
Looks like we have a
questions
few
now.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Micro business limits. Everybody wants to know. We'd like to
So
know
do
too.
we.
We'd like to know as well. This isn't quite like New Jersey. If anyone's familiar with New Jersey, they gave us specific restrictions for each license type. Not that we thought that New Jersey's restrictions were very sensical. So I think I'm happy maybe that New York has kicked this a bit down the road, let the regulators deal with these specifics for the license caps rather than New Jersey's method of kind of just throwing a dart at the board to choose the restriction. So at this point, we don't know what the restrictions would be. I would say certainly we'll have some cultivation canopy restrictions. It would seem in New Jersey, they gave us employee limits. New York could do something similar, but it's kind of an odd way to limit it. So yeah, we'll have to just wait and see there. But just assume that your business is going to have to be on the smaller side, and that you will get to be vertically integrated.
Yeah, so I'll jump into this question from Teresa in the chat. When I mentioned you can't put your dispensary in a field, she says not on a field, but does it also need to be a commercial space? I think the statute suggests this, but does not say it for sure right now. So we'll have to wait for regulations to confirm. But in the comparison of commercial to residential, I think you're gonna have to try to find a commercial space. Probably can't convert your house or apartment or flat or something into a dispensary. If that helps clarify, Teresa.
May even probably would rely on your local ordinance as well too. So wanting to see what the zoning laws are, turn out to be in your area. But yeah, like Ben says, just not out in the middle of a field. Let's see, how much might a license cost? We're not exactly sure yet. It is New York, right? Things can be pricey in New York. So I would definitely be budgeting for it to be a higher number, tens of thousands, 100,000 possibly. But they are looking to, have social equity applicants here. So they're going to want to give discounts for the social equity applicants. They're trying to make this an accessible market, competitive, letting people in, not creating barriers to entry. So for those reasons, I would think they're going to, either decrease the license fees or application fees, or at least give you a way to get a discount if you're a social equity or a priority applicant in some way.
I think the one thing the statute said from my memory is that it won't cost more than the medical license. So you can bet that it won't be more than 200 grand.
Perfect. Let's see.
So I've got another question in the chat from Aaron regarding the number of total retail licenses. Any word on if that will be further limited by locality? For example, with New York City, the 20K population target implies roughly 400 locations, which seems like a lot. I mean, I think that your question makes sense that it would be further limited, but I would say that, demand in New York City isn't going to go anywhere. And you highlighted what New York is, super dense population. I think that they could sustain 400 dispensaries easily because if you've got one, on, 5th and Park, then it's going to serve the people who don't want to walk from 7th and Park, and the one on 8th and Park will, and I think that that's really going to be the key to New York is convenience, and that the demand is just going to be there.
Yeah, let's see. Another question here from Lacey. Do you think small towns will be able to have a dispensary? Yeah, I definitely think so. They'll be spread throughout the state. That's a big part of having access. Though there may be less dispensaries in those areas, I think at least the bigger cities and the rural areas will certainly have some. But yeah, more will probably be towards the New York City area. But and again, it depends on your local city's ordinances if they're going to allow them or not. Some smaller cities may only allow a very limited number.
Yes, we've got another question from Chad in the chat. Would love some details about who might qualify as a disadvantaged farmer. So the full definition is available in the statute, and it's actually distressed farmers. So sorry for the confusion there. But Chad, basically, it's a long paragraph, and we can send this to you via email, but not going to read off the whole thing right now. Just know there's basically two main qualifying categories. So you'll either fit into the first one or the second. I believe the first one is small farm classification, and the second is a group that's been underrepresented in farm ownership, just as kind of an overview. But we can send you that entire definition via email. And then got a couple of questions from Nick in the chat. From micro business, do all aspects of the business have to be under one roof, one property? What are some of the typical regulations there? This is still up in the air in New York. I think you're asking good questions. They've intimated that you'll be able to have multiple locations for processing and cultivation. So we may see that you may be able to have multiple properties for a micro business, but all of the stuff for micro business has yet to come. It will come in regulations. Typical regulations there is under everything under one roof. You can't try to subcontract out something. Those will count as your employees for an employee count and things like that. They don't want people to sort of arbitrage the micro business process usually.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're sure about co-location yet. I know that co-location is mentioned with cultivators and processors, so they can be co-located. So I would assume that your micro business would also be allowed to be co-located. And not sure if it would be required. Usually it's not a great practice to have a required co-location, since that would mean that your retailer has to be at the same location as your cultivation or your processor, which usually go in different areas and can increase your liability for your retailer if you have it in an industrial area, as well as decreasing your foot traffic. So yeah, I would hope that they're going to allow those to be separate.
Yep, and then another one from Nick. Do we know what the requirements from social equity are yet? I mean, we covered what we did know. You'll have to fit into those categories. What exactly will be required otherwise from an application perspective, from a business perspective, forthcoming with regulation. Tough to say. But those 5 categories, were you disproportionately impacted by the enforcement of cannabis, minority-owned business, women-owned business, distressed farmer, and service-disabled veteran. Those are the things that we know right now that will be the categories.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your thoughtful questions. I see we're already almost 5 minutes over. As a reminder, this is recorded. We'll send it around afterwards. If you have additional questions, send them our way. We're happy to answer them. One last question we got. Would Canna be interested in joining CLEs at California law schools and across the country? I'm sure we would be. We love educating and being educated, and always something new to learn and discuss. So, yep, certainly send anything our way there. So yeah, I guess with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you all so much, and join us in our future webinars.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And just FYI, Mark, who submitted that last question, will respond to that by email.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.